All right, that should help. There's a button on here for sound that you press two different ways, and so it fools you. Well, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you waited for the sound to come on. That's better. All right, you happy now? There we go. It was great the whole time. No, it wasn't. Nice try. All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the highlights of human civilization. It's called Coffee with Scott Adams, and you've never had a better time. But if you'd like to take this experience up to levels that no one can even understand with their tiny, shiny human brains, well, all you need for that is a copper mug or a glass, a tankard, chalice or stein, a canteen, jug or flask, a vessel of any kind. Fill it with your favorite liquid. I like coffee. And join me now for the unparalleled pleasure of the dopamine hit of the day, the thing that makes everything better. It's called the simultaneous sip, and it happens now. Go. All right. Well, we're off to a slow start, but wait till you see the finish. Oh, gets better every minute. Well, the political news is a little bit boring today, so it'll be a little bit more about technology. Google has released a new app called Doppel, Doppl, which is weird because years ago I tried to create this app, and the name I had picked for it was Doppelganger. So they've actually recreated an app that I had actually formed a company and tried to create years ago before AI. So theirs works a lot better than mine. But it's called Doppel. What it does, since you probably wonder, is it puts you in the clothing that you're looking at buying. So if you're looking at a shirt or a dress to buy, you can see yourself in that shirt or dress. So the AI will put you in it. Now, that is very cool. I think I told you when I was trying to invent my version, since that was before AI could do this, my version was to find somebody who looks just like you and found a nice shirt. Because there's always somebody who's exactly your size and would be confused for you if you were in the same room. So you just find that person wherever they are on Earth. And if they say, "Hey, I got a new outfit," well, you just look at their outfit and say, "Well, if it works for you, it probably worked for me." But Google has a better one. Now, the Snap app has glasses. So they've got those augmented reality glasses. And now there's a third party who's made an ad blocker for people wearing glasses in the real world. You know, the Snap special AI glasses. So what it does is if you're walking past a advertisement in a window or a sign that has an advertisement, it blocks it. So instead of blocking your ads on your online stuff, it blocks advertisements in the real world. I don't know how many people need that. I kinda don't mind advertisements in the real world. I only dislike them when they're digital. But anyway, that's a real product already. Well, according to Fox News, Kurt Knudsen, I think that's how you say his name, Knudsen. There's a robot-run convenience store called VenHub that's got two robotic arms that run around and grab whatever it is you've ordered on your app. Now, I can't tell if this is the beginning of something big or more of a novelty. Because, you know, there's going to be this long period of time where people are trying out all kinds of cool AI robot things. And some of them will be really successful, and some of them will be novelties. We don't know what this one will be, but we won't need human beings to run our convenience stores. Have you ever seen the estimates of what is the biggest expense for a convenience store? Now, other than buying the product, but the biggest expense you would think would be, employee salaries. And it might be salaries, but right up near the top of the biggest expenses um, are theft. So if you can remove the employees from your convenience store, you get rid of the biggest expense, not just their salary, but what they steal. All right. Elon Musk says that Grok 4, the AI that Elon's working on, Grok 4, the new upgrade, is going to come out right after July 4th. And Musk says it will reason from first principles. Now, that would be very different from what the large language models have done so far. So, is that going to be sort of a general intelligence? Will, let me see if I can catch up on your comments. Some of you are still saying you can't hear, but that's old news. We fixed that. So that's kind of exciting. Apparently, the new Grok will be unmatched. It'll be better than all the other AIs. But will it really be able to reason from first principles? So the large language models that exist, they just predict what the next word will be in the sentence. They don't have any understanding. But you wouldn't be able to reason from first principles, would you? Unless you had some kind of general intelligence. So maybe this is the beginning of something much bigger. We don't know. Meta has apparently successfully poached some really expensive high-level AI people to go work on Meta's AI and leave OpenAI. They've taken 8 key OpenAI researchers. Rowan Chung is writing about that. Do you know how much that would cost? Now, remember I told you it was fake news that they're paying $100 million signing bonus. That's not happening. But it's probably a lot. It's probably a lot. So Meta is really serious about poaching high talent, and it's working. So you know how almost every show, it seems like, I tell you about a new laboratory came up with a new battery improvement for your cars or whatever, any battery. And I always tell you, but that doesn't mean that anybody will ever build that battery. So there's probably a battery breakthrough every single day in some laboratory around the world. But it turns out that Tesla has been working on their own upgraded battery. So they're just finishing a factory in Sparks, Nevada, that'll have this new LFP battery. So lithium iron phosphate. And they're safer and more affordable than traditional EV batteries. That comes from Elon Musk. So while all these laboratories were talking about the improvements in batteries, it looks like Elon Musk was building an enormous factory to make a highly improved battery, safer and cheaper. All right, that might be a real big deal. So if you're like me, you've had some trouble figuring out what the company Palantir actually does, because it seems to do a variety of different things that don't seem directly related to each other. So I really don't know what they do, but part of what they do has something to do with, having a complete index of citizens or something. I don't know, something for the government. But there's a new thing that apparently they've got a deal for, and they're going to make some software. I don't know if they already have it or they're building it, but they have a deal for a 5-year period to build a software platform that will help with putting up nuclear power plants. Now, if you're like me, you probably said to yourself, why do you need software to build? Like, what would you need this specialized software for? And I don't know, but I can imagine that building a nuclear power plant is really, really hard and complicated. And you should make sure you do the steps in the right order. And it would be really good if you built a power plant that somebody had already built and got approved. So probably make sure that you stay within approvable limits, and probably make sure that you can do it faster, because over time you could imagine that each of the steps would be a little bit more automated, or so it might be a big deal. If we could come up with a software platform where any state who wanted to build a new nuclear power plant, you could just say, all right, first sign up for this Palantir platform, and it will tell you the rest of the stuff and make sure that you build a power plant that doesn't blow up, I guess. So that's kind of cool. I saw a user on X, Farzad, who asked Elon Musk, when does Tesla expect to get a 3-to-1 or more robotaxi to supervisor ratio? So at the moment, I believe that the cars are being watched by human beings. I don't know if that is the same as the safety person. So the robo taxis are testing in Austin. They have a human being who sits in the front seat, just in case there's some problem, I guess, because it's still a test. And are these supervisors slash teleoperators, are they remote? So are they remote human beings who are looking through the cameras of your car to make sure that the car is operating safely? So Farzad says, when do you get down to 3-to-1 so that there are more users than there are supervisors? And Musk says probably within a month or two. We continue to improve the Tesla AI with each mile driven. So I do love the fact that it seems impossible, and then it seems possible, but it seems really hard. But Musk is willing to push through all of that. However long it takes, however many people you have to have, however many people are going to be in danger. Just nothing stops him. I love that. So you might, and apparently the reason for the question is that the robotaxi would be, according to Farzad, wonderfully profitable once you get rid of the human supervisors. So we'll see. Trump says he was talking to Maria Bartiromo, and he says that we'll have a buyer for TikTok within 2 weeks. Well, within 2 weeks they'll announce it. But he says they already have a group of, quote, very wealthy people. But it's not going to be sold unless China says yes. So, we're also doing a trade discussion with China. So will they say yes? Because the alternative, they think, is that TikTok will be closed. I don't know. I feel like the odds are against it. So I feel like even if there is an approved group of wealthy people approved by the US, they would not necessarily be approved by China to buy it. So that might get delayed again. Well, you probably heard that there was some crazy shooter in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, who has now been neutralized. I guess he was such a bastard. He set a fire to attract the fire department, and they shot three of them. Three of the firemen. Two of them died. One of them is in bad shape. And I guess the shooter is already dead. I didn't see if the cops got him or he got himself, but the threat has been neutralized. Now, before you say, is that some kind of Iranian sleeper cell? I have no idea, but it doesn't sound like it. If you were a terrorist, you wouldn't do something where just a few people come to a remote forest and then you kill them. He did shoot himself, people say. You would go into a crowded area and make as much noise as you could. So it doesn't have Iranian terrorist written all over it. I see that some of you, looking at the comments, some of you know more about the story than I did because I just skimmed it before I came on. All right. So sorry about the victims, but it looks like the threat has been neutralized or neutralized itself. According to a Rasmussen poll that will be released this morning, 48% of the people polled, and I think those are usually, voters in the United States, 48% support a special prosecutor to look into the 2020 election. Now, hold that in your head for a minute. 48% of the people polled, I guess that would be adults in the United States, 48% think it's worth having a special prosecutor look into the 2020 election. Now, that would probably be pretty much every Republican, and maybe a few independents thrown in there too. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but it wasn't that long ago that if you even suggested that the 2020 election might not have been pristine, you were just canceled. You got sued. It was a terrible, terrible thing to say. And now even Rosie O'Donnell is saying, I think the 2024 election should be looked into. So we've managed to go all the way from there is no way that an election in the United States could be rigged because we have so many ways to check it. It's going all the way to we're pretty sure that we should look into this. That's a really big change in public opinion, a really big change. And I wonder if what would happen to the January 6th hoax if they actually found something big about the 2020 election. What would happen to it? Because remember, people like Bill Maher, who are still in serious TDS, they believe that the reason that Republicans mostly stormed the Capitol on January 6th, they believe the reason is that those citizens thought that they had genuinely lost the election, but wanted to take over the country with their preferred leader, Trump, anyway. Now, those of you who are not in TDS know full well that that never happened. What I mean is there were not people who believed that the election was fair who were protesting. There were only people who genuinely believed, and they could have been wrong, they might have been wrong, but they genuinely believed that the election was obviously rigged. And they were trying to delay things until we could at least find out if that was true. So going from January 6th was an insurrection, which assumes there's no way to question the accuracy of an election. That's just off the table. All the way to 48% want a special prosecutor to look into it. And by the way, 2024 might have been a little sketchy too. That is a big, big change in public opinion. Anyway, As you know, the supreme leader of Iran was immediately upon the beginning of military action by Israel, was taken by his military and put in their most secure bunker. Do you know what their most secure bunker is called? Fordow. Okay, that's just a joke. He was not put in Fordow. But it's kind of funny to imagine that his own military would put him in the best bunker they have. Oh, we got a bunker that nobody could ever bust. Why don't you put me in the bunker that's near my house? Oh, no, no. No, that bunker is not nearly good enough. You got to be in the good one, the one that's so secure that even two bunker busters would not destroy it. Would 12 bunker busters destroy it? Stop asking questions and get in this car. We're taking you to Fordow. Okay, that didn't happen, but it would have been funny. However, according to Fox News, and people watching the satellite imagery of the Fordow site, Iran is getting busy there. So it looks like they're trying to clear the roads and the entrances. And we don't know what else they're doing, but let me ask you this question. Would they spend a lot of time trying to dig stuff out of the ground if they didn't think there was some chance that important stuff survived? Would they? Were there human beings in Fordow? There might have been. So, maybe they want to, get the bodies out to give them a proper burial. Maybe. Or is it possible that they think there's a secret, well protected pocket somewhere in there that there might be some good stuff if they could find it? We don't know, but they're not ignoring the site. They're digging around, so they're up to something. We'll keep an eye on them. Meanwhile, in another part of Iran, in Tehran, CNN is reporting that there was a ceremony where women would show up with their babies. So there'd be a giant crowd of women who each had a baby, and they would hold their baby up in the air and pledge their baby's life to martyrdom. So basically, it was mothers saying, yes, kill my baby, presumably mostly sons, I guess, maybe. So martyrdom is a pretty big concept in Iran still. So if you're wondering, hey, I wonder if they're done fighting. Well, I'm guessing not. Because they don't have a concept of losing a fight. The people who stop fighting, it's because they understand the concept that they lost the fight. In Iran, apparently, they don't have that concept. You either win or you die a martyr, and that's the other way to win. Or your child dies as a martyr. That's another way to win. So Iran needs to learn that there's a way to lose a war too, because otherwise there's just going to be more of it. So that's suboptimal. Well, in related news, Iran's top Shiite cleric, who's another million-year-old guy, it looks like he's already dead, has issued a fatwa against Trump and Netanyahu. Now, the fatwa is basically, giving people permission for violence against them. But why would it be that the top cleric issued a fatwa, whereas is that something that the supreme leader normally does or could do or would endorse or wouldn't endorse? So it brings me back to my central question. Is the supreme leader still in charge of that country? Because I don't believe it. I believe he's been nudged aside and that the military is already in charge. That's my belief at the moment. I could be wrong. I wouldn't say 100%, but if I had to put a percentage on it, 60 to 70% chance that the supreme leader's already moved aside or nudged aside. He might still think he's in charge, but maybe the reality is a little different. All right. According to Newsmax World, Israel has postponed the trial that Netanyahu was in. So he was accused of various corruption things. And you remember that Trump was making some social media noise saying that they should stop lawfaring Netanyahu because he likes working with Netanyahu, apparently. Now, remember I said when I was talking about it yesterday, I guess, I said, is it even like a possibility that the Israel judicial system will look at a Truth Social post by Trump and then cancel the trial? And I was kind of mocking that as even a strategy. Like, why would Trump even think that could possibly work? Like, why would he waste any time on something that couldn't possibly happen? And then it got postponed. Now, we don't know why it got postponed. It has something to do with Israel's, vital interests. Probably something military, something about security. But the court actually postponed it. Now, postponed doesn't mean Netanyahu's out of trouble, but are these related? Is it possible that Trump's message actually made a difference? Or was Netanyahu and his legal team working on this the whole time? And, they just had a breakthrough that the court was willing to accept. I don't know. But it does seem like a bit of a coincidence that when Trump speaks up about it, Israel suddenly is acting different than you imagine they would act. So we'll keep an eye on that. Well, the big, beautiful bill, as Trump likes to call it, lots of infighting going on. The two people who were not in favor of it are Rand Paul and Tom Tillis in the Senate. But Tillis he just announced that he's not going to run for re-election. I guess Trump criticized him in recent posts and said he was going to encourage a potential primary challenger. And if you've been paying attention to Tom Tillis lately, you probably said to yourself, he's acting like somebody who doesn't want to run for re-election. Well, turns out he didn't. And then I believe that, I believe it was Laura Trump who is being considered as his potential replacement in North Carolina. He's North Carolina, right? Do I have that right? Well, so he's going away. And Rand Paul, he says he's basically above it because it increases the debt, and he is opposed to anything that increases the debt. So not only does it push up the debt limit by $5 trillion, but depending on how you do the math and what weasel methods you use, it either increases the budget deficit by $3.3 trillion over the next 10 years. That's what the CBO says. But the Republicans have come up with some kind of new math that turned that $3.3 trillion into nothing. So what they do is they say, well, if we don't increase taxes, that's not a change, so you don't count that. Even though it would increase the deficit, they found a way to pretend that that would be counting the dollars wrong. Oh my God. Yeah, it's as bad as you think. So I think Rand Paul's on the right track there. Trump has said that if it doesn't get passed, it will mean a 68% tax hike without the big, beautiful bill. How many of you believe that if the big, beautiful bill doesn't get passed, that we're going to have a 68% tax hike? How in the world did he calculate that? That's not even slightly possible. Anyway, but that number's out there now. I was curious how the media would summarize the bill, because I have a hypothesis that when it comes to public support, all that will matter is the summarizers, because there's something like 25 different topics that the big, beautiful bill addresses. But if you read a story about it, it's not going to list 25 things and tell you what people think about each of those elements. They're going to pick out what they think are the top line things. So I was looking at the Wall Street Journal, and I was curious how they would summarize the bill. So this is their summary. And you could tell, I think, from the summary, not 100% with certainty, but it's suggestive of what the public will think about it, because the media tells the public what their opinions are. And if the media has summarized it one way versus another way, you could kind of know what at least their readers will think of it. So Wall Street Journal says broadly, so this would be just sort of a broad summary of the bill, the mega bill would extend tax cuts and boost defense and border funding while cutting spending on Medicaid and food aid. It would add nearly $3.3 trillion to deficits compared to current law and compared to letting the tax cuts expire as they would otherwise. Now, if you knew that was the only thing that the public would know about this bill, would it pass? Nope. Because the Democrats are going to look at the part where they say Medicaid and food aid will be cut, and they're going to say nope. And then the Republicans will look at the part where it's adding to the deficit by $3.3 trillion, and they'll say nope. So the Wall Street Journal has given both sides reason to say no. Even if you like extending tax cuts and boosting defense and military, you probably rank those lower than these other hot items like Medicaid and food aid and deficit. If you ask me, the deficit is more important than all the other stuff. So that would suggest there's going to be a little bit of trouble getting this approved and making it popular enough that Republicans can do well in the midterms. All right. So they're using weasel math to make it look like they're not increasing the deficit, but every reasonable person thinks that they are. All right. So, and I guess Tom Tillis is opposed to the Medicaid cuts as well. Yeah. And Laura Trump is seriously considering running for the North Carolina seat. I believe she's from North Carolina, but doesn't live there presently. How much time do you need to go live someplace and have that as your main residence before you can run for the Senate? Do you have to have just a mailing address there? Like, what is the requirement for residency? I don't know. But it might happen. And they say if she ran, she would win easily. I believe that. Well, you know that Canada had said it was going to charge American tech companies with some kind of digital sales tax. And Trump said, if you're going to do a digital sales tax on our companies, we're going to cancel our trade negotiations and just send you the bill. The bill would be, here's what your tariffs are. We're done negotiating. And Canada said, well, maybe we'll drop that digital sales tax thing so we can negotiate. So that worked. Trump threatened them with some tariff badness, and Canada said, "All right, wait, hold on. All right, we'll put that in pause, and we'll go back to the negotiating table." But Europe, on the other hand, still has one of these digital services taxes. So they have not dropped it yet, but they're still negotiating. But Trump says he's going to deal with Europe and all the countries that have not made deals yet, which is most of them, just by sending them tariff letters and telling them what they're going to pay. So on July 9th, the current extension of uh, tariffs being held off until the negotiations were done. That after July 9th, Trump is going to say, you can negotiate if you want. We're open to negotiating. But until then, here's your bill for tariffs. Apparently, the NATO agreement for the NATO countries to spend more, going from 2% of their GDP up to 5% over time, might be one of the things that solves the trade negotiations between Europe and the U.S. Because one of the big issues for Trump was that there was a big trade imbalance. So they weren't buying enough of our stuff. But the NATO increase, a lot of that money will go to buy American arms. And so just on its own, it's going to close that, it's going to do a lot of work to close that trade deficit. So the NATO stuff could have the weird effect of making the trade talks work better. And let's see what else has happened. Trump is also mad at Japan because Japan's also got a big trade deficit with us, meaning that we buy more of their stuff than they buy from us. And that could get fixed, according to Reuters. Trump is suggesting that they buy more of our energy. Now, I don't know if there's any limitations to how much of our oil and gas they could buy, but that would be one way to fix it. And if not, I guess they'll just get a bill. So Trump will send the bill for the tariffs. So there was a headline that Jake Tapper on CNN has conceded on the air that Trump has achieved, this is his own words, Jake Tapper, what may be, empirically, the best week of his presidency so far. Now, isn't that an interesting way to remove credit from Trump? They're saying it might be the best week of his presidency. So the comparison is not leaders everywhere or presidents, all the presidents we've ever had, which is what I think is the proper comparison. They're comparing him to himself so that you don't have to give him too much credit. It's like, well, for his presidency, that was a good week. So it was reported like Jake Tapper was finally giving him credit. Well, I don't think he did. I think he said, even Trump is going to have a good week compared to Trump. So it was sort of a compliment without the compliment. Anyway, so Tapper mentioned the Supreme Court victories, expanding his power, the Dow being at a high, and the ceasefire between Israel and Iran, and in Rwanda, the Congo-Rwanda thing. So even Jake Tapper is seeing that Trump had a good week, although he should have compared him to other leaders, not to himself. Senator Chris Murphy, who is becoming like the Grinch of the Democrats, he's one of these angry pundits. You can always get an angry comment out of him. He was asked if he gives Trump any credit for getting the border under control. Now, if you were asked on camera in public, could you give Trump any credit for getting the border under control? How in the world could you spin that into something negative for Trump? If you had to do it as like an assignment, and I said, it's not what you believe, but just as an assignment, could you come up with an argument that Trump has failed at the border? Well, I wouldn't be able to do it, but Chris Murphy, he says no, he's not going to give Trump credit for the border crossings being low because Trump administration is violating the law to get there. And the law that he says is being violated is the law that allows people to apply for asylum. I guess he was part of voting on that law. So I didn't know this, but it sounds like the Trump administration has done something, probably an executive order, I'm guessing, that says you cannot easily apply for asylum because that's the part that was being abused. Everybody was just saying, "Oh, asylum," and then you could get into the country and stay here for, years, waiting for your asylum hearing. And then once the asylum hearing happens, you probably, and at least in the old days, you could have snuck away and stayed in the country anyway. So that's what he's arguing for. So the best the Democrats have, and he's one of their smarter people, the best they have is arguing against process again, except that the process was completely corrupted. So they're not just arguing for a good process, which you could understand. Oh, well, we had this good process, so they should be following our good process. It was the worst process ever. It literally effectively opened our border to anybody who wanted to walk in and claim that they were, asking for asylum. So once again, the Democrats have been, I don't even want to say tricked, because they're doing it themselves. They're taking the 20% view on another 80-20 again. And again, they're not arguing about the part that people care about. Was the border open before? Yes. Has the border now been closed? Yes. That's where the public is. Do you think that we really give a shit about some asylum thing that might be getting gamed by the Trump administration? And I don't even know if it's being gamed or if they have, solid legal standing. It doesn't matter to me. Does it matter to you? I only care that they closed it. It was an immediate security threat, an existential threat to the country. You think I care that he bent a rule? If he did, I don't know if he did. But oh my God, how could he be so immensely tone deaf that you can't at least say, all right, it was good on the border, but we have all these other issues? Democrats. Wow. Well, Tyler Winklevoss on X was saying, quote, I was wondering what happened to the LA riots. They just stopped all of a sudden. Makes sense. They were never organic, just NGO-funded propaganda. Well, apparently, and I don't know if this is related, but apparently at about the same time that the FBI and the IRS announced that they were going to look into who was funding the protests stopped. Now, did the protests get what they wanted? Did they make ICE stop doing what it was doing? No. Did they get anything they were demanding? Not that I'm aware of. So why did these massive protests just stop? Well, my guess is that Tyler Winklevoss is exactly right, and that the people funding it stopped funding it. We don't know that for sure, but it looks like it. So look how much we've grown up since 2016. in 2016, if I'd seen a national protest, like Black Lives Matter, I would have thought it was organic. I would have known that, George Soros might be paying for some signs and stuff like that. But I would have thought, for the most part, it's organic. It's just getting a little boost from money people. But now I don't think that at all. Now I think that none of them are organic, and that all it is, fake protests, and you just wait a few days and it stops, especially if you talk about who funded it. So we're much more, I think, understanding that these protests are fake and you can just wait them out. I saw an analysis on X. I don't know if it was done by somebody else, but Daniel Greenfield tells us that only 5% of New Yorkers voted for the socialist candidate Mamdani. Now, remember, he's not elected mayor yet. He only got through the primaries. But the primaries are not something where most people vote. And there weren't any Republicans voting because it was a Democrat primary. So if you go through the math, as Daniel Greenfield did, and you look at, and only Democrats, and then you take out the votes for the other candidates who's running against, and et cetera, only 5% of the city voted for him. And he's overwhelmingly favored to win. Now, does that track? Does it make sense to you that only 5% voted for him, but he's overwhelmingly favored to win? It could be. It could be. If the 5% is sort of accidentally a good, polling proxy for the larger market, it could be. And remember, the Democrats matter more than Republicans just because it's a Democrat town. So whoever gets nominated as a Democrat is overwhelmingly likely to become the next mayor. But it is possible, at least this number opens up the possibility that the city could come to its senses and realize that, he's not the best solution. Let's see, here are some things he said. So Trump is trying to label him a communist, which I think is hilarious. I don't believe he technically qualifies as a communist, but communist is sort of the N word for socialists. You know what I mean? It's the word you're not supposed to use because it's going too far. But it's, socialism sounds like maybe something you might want, whereas communism sounds like something nobody wants. So it is pretty good. It's good branding, but I don't know if he technically qualifies as a communist. So here's what one of the things that Mamdani said. He was asked, I guess he'd made previous comments that we shouldn't have billionaires. And so he was asked, to comment on that. And he said, I don't think that we should have billionaires. And then he talked about fairness. If some people are billionaires, that's obviously a sign of an unfair system. Now, do you remember what I always say about fairness? I've been saying this for years. Fairness is a concept that was invented so that idiots and children have something to talk about. Smart people don't really start with fairness as their standard. And the reason is nobody agrees what fair is. If you could get two people to agree what fair looks like, well, maybe you could use that as your standard, but not really. In the real world, we don't agree. Do you think it's fair that somebody could work hard and make more money and then it could be taken away and given to somebody who didn't work hard and didn't make much money? Is that fair? Well, depends who you ask. So there's no universal standard of fairness. If there were, well, then maybe I would say, yeah, go ahead and use that under some circumstance. But if nobody can even agree what fairness looks like, you can't use that as a standard. That just allows you to do anything you want and just say, well, I've decided this is what fair looks like. So he wants to tax white people more. Specifically, he said tax the whiter neighborhoods more. And now he wants to get rid of billionaires. So billionaire um, Bill Ackman was not too happy about that. um, and now the other thing that I noticed today is I saw more anti-Muslim commentary on X than I have ever seen before. I think today was the high limit of it. Now, I'm not going to say that the commentary was unfair because it talked about, for example, the practices of the Iraqi Muslim population. And I won't repeat some of the things that were claimed as being standard operating procedure for that group of people because it's too horrible. And I don't know how much is real and how much is, certain people, but not everybody. I don't know any of that. But I will tell you that probably because of Mamdani and maybe because of the Israel-Iran conflict, I'm seeing people who would never have said these things out loud just going right at the Muslim culture problem. Now, my take on it is not that I'm judging anybody as being good or bad, because, who am I to judge anything? But it's easy to say that the systems are not compatible. You can't just take a bunch of, hardened Sharia law Muslims and drop them in the community with your non-Muslims. It wouldn't matter what else they were if they were just anything else. It's never going to work. So, well, obviously there are tons of Muslim citizens in this country who don't have any radical thoughts. They're not breaking any laws. They're not offending you in any way, and they're completely, part of the American experience. Um, but we can all agree that the hardcore Muslim version just will never be compatible with, the American cultural experience. So unless the Muslims are the ones who are conforming so that they can fit into the current system, the system would have to change if you got enough people who demanded that change. So it does seem like there is more anti-Muslim content than I've ever seen before, but I'm not going to judge that. It could be because this is the time to talk about it. Well, there's a story that the Mexican cartel hired a hacker, I guess one of their own hackers, to hack into the phone of an FBI assistant legal attaché who was at a U.S. embassy, and he broke into the phone remotely. So I think the only way you can do that is by sending somebody a file that they click on, and then it can take over their phone. So that's probably what happened. But they got into the phone, and then they found the names of informants. But of course, the informants are who the cartel wants to kill. So they found the name of the informants. But then, and this is the impressive part, the same hacker hacked into the public camera system in Mexico so they could track where the guy who owned the phone, they could track him in public. So it was just like a TV show. So they got into his phone and they knew who he was looking for, who his informants were. And then they could see him actually on the street and who he met with. And that allowed them the confirmation to go out and kill the informant. I don't know if they successfully killed any, but that was a risk. That's This is like one of those stories I read about a serial killer who got away with it for decades and had a torture thing built in his backyard underground. And I think, well, I certainly can't approve of the serial killer, but I got to say, he's got some good work ethic there. So this hacker, I have the same feeling. I do not approve of him breaking into phones, and I don't approve of his hacking, and I certainly don't approve that he's helping the cartels kill informants. But I have to admit, that took some skill. There was a lot of skill to do those two things. So there's that. I guess the Duke Law School Law Journal, they sent a secret memo to minority applicants telling them they get extra points if they write about their race. So they were being coached on how to do DEI without DEI. So they presumably are not allowed to ask, what's your race, and then take that into account for admissions. But they would be allowed to read an essay that all the applicants have to write. So they're saying, if you're going to write the essay, you might as well put something in that essay about your race. Why? Don't ask why. Just put it in there. Trust us. We'll take care of it. So they're in trouble. The Free Beacon is reporting on this. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's a lazy summer Monday, and the regular news is boring because the big, beautiful bill, I'm so tired of that damn thing. I don't know if it'll ever be passed, but I'm definitely tired of it. I got worn down. However, because Trump is still your president and the world is a crazy place, I would expect there to be some big news that breaks, because there always is. On the other hand, it's entirely possible that because the news business will be going on vacation for the 4th of July, that there just won't be much news. Because, your news is mostly fake. It's based on real stuff, usually. But the news decides what to get you worked up about. And so if enough of the frontline people are on vacation, you're not going to get worked up because they won't do the kind of content that gets you worked up. So we might be entering the boring phase of the summer, or there'll be another gigantic war. Possible. All things are possible. All right, that's all I have for you today. I'm going to say hi to my beloved local subscribers. And stock market's not doing so well. All right. Good. All right, locals, I'm coming at you privately. The rest of you, I hope to see you tomorrow. Same time, same place.